Shalom, 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 and greetings. Welcome, my name is Ezra ben Khazar, the Hebrew here, and we are here with another video. Let's get into it. So the last video, I had a conversation with my brother Hakam Joe, and we talked about Black Khazaria in the land of El Telkos. Today, we want to jump back into some DNA studies. If you checked out the last DNA video, you will see that we linked up actual Khazarian DNA in my genome, and we found that I harbored 4.2% from the medieval Khazarian cognate, the medieval Alans, which is interesting because this is also what is found in Litvak Jews, that they still harbor this. We went into my DNA haplogroup and seeing that it was also found in Western Scythians as well, increasing the chances of this being a Khazarian lineage. So for now, I've just been playing with different DNA sites and seeing what comes up. A feature on Illustrated DNA that I didn't talk about last time is the modern population admixture. And this is interesting because when I added my DNA into this, it's customizable, so it might change, but you do get the same populations. And what I want to talk about here is the East Slavic admixture from Cave and this Dargin ancestry from Dagestan. So today the video is going to be mainly about Khazarian Jews and their connections with the Dargin people in the Cavan region, as we see that both of these are in my genome. The Dargin people have lived in their present-day location for many centuries. They formed the state of Kitag in the Middle Ages and in the Renaissance up until the Russian conquest. And today, the Dargins are one of the most numerous ethnic groups in Dagestan, which is an amalgamation of many historical peoples of that region. The second most numerous after the Avars. Most likely, the Dargins were a part of every steppe empire, from the Yannid to the Scythians to the Huns to the Khazars. I want to take you guys to a paper here called Cosmic Expression in the Caucasus, Kitag Embroideries. And we're going to read about the Dargin people. Could these be Khazars? These textiles are but one of the cultural expressions on which we could draw. They take the name from an area of Dagestan, the Kitag district, and are associated with its principal residents, the Dargins, also called the Kitag. On close analysis, however, we see that these highly symbolic embroideries are a synthesis of different traditions from nearby communities of Komic peoples and the Mountain Jews. Now, we'll come back to the Mountain Jews in relation to the Khazars a little later, but let's continue reading about the Dargin. From nearby communities of Komic peoples, and as well as others further afield in Turkey and Iran. Thus, these artifacts became a globalized example of not just a quote-unquote world view, but of a quote-unquote cosmos view. The Kitag ethnic group of Dargins number about 20,000 people and are known as producers of the Kitag silk embroidery. The intersection of the Dargins and the Mountain Jews in the production of Kitags are representative of the lively cultural fusion that's found in the Caucasus. So as we see that the Dargin and the Mountain Jews today have an interesting and close relationship that is reminiscent of the old Khazarian Jewish relations. The Mountain Jews may be divided into two groups. The earlier branch is said to be descended from the Jews of the Khazar Empire of over 1,000 years ago. Local tradition has it that they have been centered in Majalis, in the middle of the Kitag district, since medieval times, an area that they share with the Dargins and the Komiks. As evidence of assimilation, I met local Komic youths in 1987 who still spoke Hebrew, while historian Zoya Ramazanova and I found that the Mountain Jews' culinary traditions have much in common with that of the Dargins. Majalis served as the capital of the Utmi, the Dargin leader. The Jewish residents were under the personal protection of the Utmi, who was also called Salafan, a princely title that was borrowed from the Khazars. Since the Khazars were said to have helped the Utmi in 916 CE, like the Khazar rulers, the Utmi were accustomed to visit mosques on Friday, synagogue on Saturday, and church on Sunday. These Khazar Jews are now virtually extinct as a distinct ethnicity, having been assimilated into the Dargin and other tribes. So as we see here that the Khazars still practice their religious tolerance and accepted the other religions, even worshiping in their buildings, possibly like a Noahide, a Messianic Noahide type of religion for some. A later group of Jewish migrants came from Iran about 200 years ago and today live in the region around Derbent, a city in southeastern Dagestan along the Caspian Sea. They use an Aramaic prayer book written in Hebrew characters. A significant survivor of this complex lineage was Professor Rashid Kaplanov, 1949 to 2007, of Muslim and Jewish heritage, as well as a hereditary prince of the Komiaks. Professor Kaplanov re-established Jewish studies in Russia. As with other ethnicities, the Mountain Jews have long involvement with the textiles. The nearby Bukhara Jews from Uzbekistan make Suzani embroideries, reminiscent of a parochet, Torah art curtains, and embroidered covers of the Torah in synagogues. Further research is required to discover which of the many motifs in Kitag embroideries are of Khazar Jewish origin. One example of a Shirvan dragon carpet made about 1800 appears to have 4 Hebrew letters, including Aleph and Lamed. Further analysis of Kitag embroideries could add to knowledge of the integrated traditions of the Caucasus. So as we see, the Jewish exiles in this area under the Dargins would be the first Jews of Khazaria. These Jews, in my opinion, and according to different sources that we'll get into later, like the Shechner letter, are of various Israelite tribes or Northern Kingdom tribes, and are predominantly also of Persian and Armenian Jewish origin, and later, and in some senses, like Crimea, simultaneously with Greek and Romano Jews. So the record supports the strong positive impression that the Mountain Jews left on their neighbors. Literate and religious, the Mountain Jews were also accomplished horse riders as well, and warriors, skilled agriculturalists. They displayed an inviolable determination to adapt to their environment and to the region's rich musical portfolio. As you can hear, they added their own complementary repertoire. So speaking more on the Dargin and the Mountain Jews' interesting relationship, I want to take you to an interesting Reddit post that I found while doing research. This is someone that's looking for Persian influence in Dargin culture, a possible Khazarian-Persian cultural sway, an Indo-Iranian connection. As we've seen that a lot of the Jews would have fled from Persia into the Dargin regions, these would be the first Khazarian Jews, or proto-Khazarian, I should say, Jews. But let's go to the Dargin Redditor named Gubdalan. This is what he says. Dargins are the main population of Majalis, which is the city that we mentioned above. And Dargins live around the city, and there are mixed families of Mountain Jews and Dargins. And I think you may be one too. And he's speaking to the one who posed the question. They both go on to talk about the friendship and religious tolerance amongst them, very similar to ancient Khazaria. And he talks about the mixing of the two groups. This is what he says. Usually, there were Jewish women and Dargin men. When it was the other way around, I heard only one case. Now, almost every family has at least one relative of another nation. I think both sides consider it beneficial. You are a Jew if your mother is Jewish, and you are a Dargin if your father is a Dargin. Jews by mother, Dargin by father. And among our peoples, there was no conflict, because Islam recognized the Torah, even so that a Muslim could pray in a synagogue and a Jew in a mosque. So we see what this Redditor is saying here not only matches our article from above, but is also matching what we read in history. Supreme tolerance and peace amongst this people who seem primarily focused with running a nation and building knowledge, religious knowledge, spiritual knowledge. Very similar to Messianic Noahide Judaism. We believe the Khazars may have started as Noahides, and then various families, such as the Bulanids, became full-fledged Jews through conversion. But anyway, back to Reddit. Another poster who is a mountain Jew named True Refrigerator says this. My parents are Jews from Dagestan, Makakala. I know that my grandfather is born in Majalis. Am I correct? Is there still a place? As far as I know, and as far as the story goes, at least part of the Dagestani Jewish community came from Persia. So for the Dagestani Jews, they were for sure Persian influence, while they mixed with the Persian Jewish immigrants. They even formed a new language together, Judeo-Tat, or Juhuri. That's about Jews from the area, though. I'm not sure about others. It's one side of my family who came from Majalis and later Makakala. The other side came mostly from Derbent. And yes, they have a bit different words compared to the ones who came from Derbent. I'm not sure if you can say it's a whole unique dialect, but it has some uniqueness. And they surely have some cultural differences. Me, myself, mostly grew up from the side from Majalis. Interesting. So according to his post, we see that there are cultural differences between the northern mountain Jews and the southern mountain Jews. And as we talk about Persia, I think it's interesting to note that the Ashkenazi Levite clade might have came from Persia, but perhaps from a way later time, maybe the time of Esther or before then. Gublin, the Dargin Redditor, goes on to say, the Lezgins are the border people of Dagestan with Azerbaijan and were closest to Persia. Persia owned only the coastal territory of Dagestan, and the peoples who lived there went to the mountains so as not to be conquered. As a result, all the peoples of Dagestan united and drove out the ruler of Iran. And a saying appeared. They say that after Nadir Shah's campaigns in Dagestan, a proverb appeared in Iran that said, if the Shah has gone mad, let him go to war against Dagestan. So we see that the mountain Jews who were in that area and the Dargin people ended up revolting against the Persian rule in this area. Perhaps something to do with the Western Turkic Khaganate and the rise of the Khazarian tribes, maybe the rise of old Great Bulgaria. All these things are interesting, but now we're seeing an origin of Jewish population in Khazaria, besides the Shetner letter, which we'll get into later. So now, real quick, let's explain the Kavan ancestry now. As you know, we have the Kavan letter, and I will read about this in the my favorite source, Jews of Khazaria, and pages 95, 96, and 99. And we read, the subject of the letter is the unfortunate circumstance facing Yaakov ben Hanukkah. The Jews of Cave wrote this letter of recommendation on Yaakov's behalf. Yaakov's brother had borrowed a sum of money as a loan, but afterward he was attacked and killed and his money was stolen. And when the money lenders learned about this incident, they imprisoned Yaakov, who was his brother's gardener. Yaakov remained in captivity for 1 year until the Jews of Cave freed him and paid 60 gold coins. So the purpose of the letter was to help raise 40 coins that still needed to be paid to help get Yaakov out. And this is what it says. So now, all our masters, rise up your eyes to heaven and do as is your goodly custom, for you know how great is the virtue of charity, for charity saves men from death. Very, very interesting. It is said that this letter was supposed to be for German Jews, but it ended up amongst the Egyptian Jews instead. Interesting. And there was a Turkic runiform that was added at the bottom, perhaps in the Ugaric Turkic tongue. And it says, "We have read." Very, very interesting. Another interesting point was that the names of the Jews who were on this letter are of mixed Hebrew and non-Hebrew origins. And some interesting names here, such as Gosada bar Kaibar Kohen, which has the name Kaibar in it, possibly denoting Kabaric ancestry or Black Khazarian ancestry here. Very, very fascinating. Also has Kohen in his last name. And a possible explanation for that is that the Kohanim or the Levites that were in Khazaria could have been from actual Israelites, and they mixed in as well with the Khazars, which could also explain things like my ancestry, which seems to have equal Turkic and Levantine, or even a little bit more Levantine in it. So what we know is that the letter was signed by Khazars. Well, we believe that the letter was signed by Khazars, and that it was Khazars living in Cave that practiced standard rabbinical Judaism and Noahide Judaism. And it was also non-royals, as we see, that adopted Noahide Judaism and Rabbinic Judaism as their faith. This is a quote that we read from Golby. The new Cavan letter may thus be said to support, and indeed to demonstrate, the authenticity of other Hebrew texts pertaining to the Khazar Jews, and together with them shows that Khazarian Judaism was not limited to the rulers, but rather was well rooted in the territories of Khazaria, reaching even to its border city of Cave. So what is it about Cave? How was it founded? Let's go to page 27, 28, and 29 in our same source, and we'll read about the three Khazarian brothers. Cave's founding three brothers, Kay, Sheikh, and Juhuri. These three brothers were associated with the Khazar Empire, as the chronicle at one point explicitly says that the three brothers were the kin of the Khazars. And this is the quote from a Cavan person. "And we, Cavans, are living here and pay tribute to Kay, Sheikh, and Juhuri's kin, to the Khazars." So this is very fascinating, as we do know that from the early days, this place was inhabited by the Khazars and the Magyars. And we talked about this as well in our Black Khazarian video with Hakam Joe in the previous video. So part of Cave was founded by the Khazars in the early 9th century under the name Sanbat, which is very close to the word Sambata or Sabbath. But Sambata could also have meant high fortress, and that Cave was a riverbank settlement or a lower settlement. The culture of early Cave was partly based on the Khazarian Saltova way of life, and it's likely that the Khazars maintained a garrison in Cave. And we already read about the Cavan letter, which demonstrates the existence of its Jewish community. After several decades of Khazarian rule, the Rus wrested control of Cave from the Khazars. Prince Igor or Prince Oleg conquered the city and killed Askod and Dur, who were the former rulers. And after that, it became the capital of the Polain tribe. But in the 12th century, there were separate gates in cave, the Poldul Gate and the Jewish Gate. The Jewish Gate was likely located in the northwestern portion of the city of Yaroslav. A lot of these cities didn't make it past 1124. If you would like more information on the history of the Khazars in this western area, please go back and watch the other video. But for now, that's all I have for you now. Perhaps later we'll go into more of the mountain Jews. But for now, check out some of the Dargin people, and let's continue to get edified. I'm going to continue to dig into the DNA, and we're going to continue to look up Khazarian Judaism, and we'll start explaining some of that. Like, comment, and subscribe, everybody, and I hope you continue to have a blessed week. Shalom. Grace and peace.